So I'm sitting outside because it's beautiful and it kind of fits the theme of what I'm talking about today, so I apologize if there's any background noise, but I want to be outside, so here we are. Hi, my name is Kate Kostelnik, and today I'm going to be doing a photo review of the photographer Amy Vitale. Amy Vitale is a humanitarian photographer. She's worked with National Geographic and she's an ambassador for Nikon. So I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of background on who she is, just so you have some context going into this review. She's a 5-time recipient of the World Press Photos, and she published a best-selling book called Panda Love, talking about her experience photographing pandas in China. Now, she started off as an amateur photographer, and then she kind of got thrown into war photography when she was traveling abroad, and that kind of, changed her perspective on the world around her and how she was capturing photos. And I recently watched a TED Talk, and I will link it down below. It's a really great TED Talk that dives further into some of her photography that I didn't touch on in this presentation, so I'll link that below. Strongly recommend it. But she talked about, she was never someone that enjoyed being in front of the camera, and she found strength and power behind the camera. And she also, traveling to all these foreign countries, empowered other women and showing the strength that, women have. So I'm going to start off with her series called The Last Goodbye. So these photos were taken in Sudan, and she was capturing some of the last white rhinos on the planet. Something I really like about her and her photography, she picks these stories to, bring awareness to issues like, animal extinction and the impacts that we have on nature and how we are causing a mass extinction of certain species at a very unsustainable rate. She's using her skill and what she's passionate about to bring awareness to things that are important. And I know a lot of people probably don't think twice about species in another country, but it all plays a big role in, the grand scheme of things, and it's important that we protect biodiversity and animal species. With this photo specifically, you feel the story behind the image, and it's incredibly impactful. Knowing what the series is about, looking at this photo, it's, heartbreaking and heartwarming all at the same time, because, these people are fighting to protect these creatures, and there's only 3 left in the world. So it's kind of a big deal. I also love her use of color within this series and how it's not overly saturated and it's slightly dull, but I think that helps drive the story home, and the overall composition is incredibly strong. And this second photo, I think, is the most powerful within this series. Of course, you see the rule of thirds being applied, but the way she photographs the hands on the rhino's face has kind of a contradicting imagery, because it could be seen as like almost the person holding the rhino down, but also, comforting the rhino. So depending on how you view the photo, you can kind of get 2 interpretations of it. Obviously, looking at the context of the photo, that this person's, supporting the animal and, providing comfort, which I think is incredibly powerful. Again, the composition is just mind-blowing. And that's something you'll probably hear me say throughout this, because all of her composition is incredibly well thought out, really impactful, because it's highlighting, the beauty and the pain of life. There's that grotesque, violent side of humanity, which I won't really show her photos of that in this series, but there are some pretty gruesome photos that she has, as well as like the beauty behind humanity and all the good that we're fighting for, and that there is good in the world. So with these rhinos, they are guarded 24/7, 7 days a week. The ivory of rhinos' horns is incredibly popular and worth more than gold, so people, poach rhinos and other animals trying to gain their ivory. So since these are like the last 3 on the planet, they're heavily guarded, which I think, again, kind of shows that contrast between, nature and man, and how at this point man has to use guns to protect nature. And again, I said, the composition's incredibly powerful. I like how it's split horizontally, directly in half between the skyline and the ground. And I also love the use of the men framing the rhino, because again, it shows that level of protection over the rhino. This next photo, same as all the other ones, is incredibly powerful. I love the level of attentiveness and care on the man's face, and not necessarily complacency, but almost a sense of relaxation from the rhino. All of these rhinos were originally held in captivity and then were released back into the wild in hopes to kind of help repopulate this species. I just love how connected he is to the rhino. I think that's, again, strong composition, and it tells a story. That was another reason why I picked her to review, because besides being a humanitarian, like, her photography tells a story, which most photography does, but not always a story about humanity and its relationship to nature. So that's something I really value about her photography, is she's expressing something more than just a timeline of a story. She's encapsulating what it is to be human and all of the implications that come with that. The third photo I love because it reminds me of a scene in Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which, if you don't know, it's my favorite movie. That was my main reason for being drawn to this one, because it did remind me of one of my favorite movies. But I also love how the focus is on that photo and the foreground is slightly blurred, as well as like the edges. And I love black and white photos. I find them extremely powerful because, you know, when you strip a photo of its color, you are forced to look at the content more, and you're not distracted by the meaning behind the color, and you're forced to look at just the context of the photo. And that's something I really love in photography. As much as I do love a color photo, I also really appreciate a photo in black and white. I don't know, actually that might not be in black and white, now that I'm looking at it. Regardless, the colors are very dull. And one really cool thing about this series is every single photo she sold was 100% of those proceeds were donated to the Old Pigetta? Old Pigetta. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is the wildlife conservation in Africa that is keeping these white rhinos. So she's not just saying she's a humanitarian and taking images, but she follows through on that. You know, people don't always do things for the sake of helping, but they do it for the sake of, you know, gaining popularity or fame or money. And it's so nice to see a photographer who's extremely successful still stay grounded in their belief system of helping others and bringing awareness to things that we need to be aware of. So the next series I'm going to talk about is Women of Impact. So this collection of work highlights women, of course, and it was put together to celebrate the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote, because yay, women's rights. So this first photo, I mean the geometric shapes within this photo is so captivating. But those geometric shapes follow your eye line to those two figures, and then more than anything, you know, if your eye didn't go to them because of the lines, then your eye is drawn to them because of the color. I think compositionally it's so beautiful. I love the geometric shape and just how it guides the eye through the photo. The second photo I'm going to talk about, I love because of its resemblance to a Renaissance portrait painting. You know, that solid background, the vibrant colors, that strong contrast, I think all resemble what you would see in a painting from that era. And I honestly, when I first saw this image, I thought it was a painting. And I love just the heavy black and then that vibrant color and how they kind of contradict each other, but in like a very beautiful way. So I think this is another really strong image, again highlighting the importance and strength of women. Now this image, I love the colors in this image, and this photo specifically was taken during the Last Goodbye series, but this specific collection is a collection of all of her work that again highlight women. The color in this photo, bam, bam, that color pops. Yeah, I just love the way the colors pop, and it highlights, you know, the culture and the location and again the strength of women. I love how they're framed within the composition, centered. It's your main focal point, like your eyes go directly to the women, which I think is really strong. And again, the colors! I love the colors. Let the wind settle down. Okay, and the last photo in this series that I want to highlight is this image. The reason I picked this image is I love how ladybug. I love how the silhouette that's created while she's doing, you know, what's the term for that? Hacking weeds, cutting down weeds while she's working. I love, you know, the ambiguity that comes with the figure, and you can tell it's a woman based off of the overall shape. But I like that there's ambiguity with, like, who is she? What's her purpose? You don't totally know the story behind her, but you see her working hard, you see her strength, you see her, you know, doing what society would say is like a man's job. You know, hard labor. In American culture, it's more of a male dominant field. So seeing a woman doing it is incredibly impactful. And again, her black figure against that very light surroundings, incredibly impactful. The next series I'll be talking about is Montana Ranching Redefined. So this first image, wow. So this photo is very similar to the last photo we looked at, with that concept of a black silhouette against a very vibrant background. And it creates that level of ambiguity, but within this photo specifically, the scale of the horse in comparison to the world around it shows that idea of how small we really are. And I think it creates this level of vastness, but you're still drawn and pulled into this small figure. And I think it just shows, like, relatively, like, where humans are in the grand scheme of things. We are so small and so minute. This one, again, with that level of ambiguity that you see within the other photos that we talked about, is also applicable here. You don't see the horse's face, you don't see the woman's face, you just see their hair. What you see a lot in Amy's photos is, you know, that level of ambiguity and also, like, stark contrast. This isn't every single one of her photos. Obviously, as we saw, there's a lot of photos that display the human very clearly, but I love seeing these photos where you don't see the human, and you don't even see the animal in this one. And I think that in and of itself is a very captivating photo, because you're like, who are these people? What do they do on a day-to-day life? And it doesn't matter. It's just the connection between human and animal and nature and humanity is so apparent in her photography, and this clearly displays that it doesn't matter who these people are, but there is such a strong connection that we need to not take for granted. You know, climate change is a real thing, and not to get preachy here, but we need to take better care of our planet. And that's why I love her photography. She's showcasing that, like, we need to be better, but there's hope, and there's people who are fighting, and there are people who are connected. And that's, again, why I love her as a photographer, is because she's trying to, you know, make us aware of some of the gruesome, harsh realities, but is saying, like, it's gonna be okay. Now, this last image, I picked it because I love cows. I don't know why, but, like, to me, cows are such an interesting thing to photograph. I've done some series where I take photos of cows. The reason I love the photos of the cows is because, you know, cows are a huge part of our culture, American culture to be specific. You know, we eat so much red meat as a nation, and there's a lot of negative impacts that red meat consumption has, not only on the environment but also on the human body. The amount of water that's needed to sustain cow farms, to sustain, you know, the meat packing industry is concerning, because it uses a lot of water, and unfortunately water is not a replenishable resource, and it is important that we conserve our water. So that side bit, you know, aside, I love the way that you see the breath of the cows. You're drawn into the cows, and especially the two cows in the middle, like, they're looking so intently at the camera, and to me that showcases their strength. Cows are really smart, intelligent, pretty fierce animals. Like, cows are big. I do think it says something about, you know, our relationship to cows, because a lot of people have them as pets and keep them on the farm, but a lot of people slaughter them for meat. So it's interesting to kind of see cows in the context of a ranch. They're all tagged, meaning they are property of the ranch owner rather than just being animals. And I know there's a reason for tagging, especially with, like, a big farm. But again, it shows that, like, ownership. It's a form of branding without, you know, an iron rod into the ass of the cow. So it's interesting to see that vibrant yellow tag that, you know, claims the cow as a person's cow, a ranch owner's cow, but then in their face you see that they are their own creatures. They have their own thinking. They're very fierce, and I love just the intensity on their faces, especially those two in the middle. Again, the background's pretty simplistic. I love the look of a solid background, which obviously is something that we've seen in all of her photography. After going through a lot of her photos, I definitely took a lot of inspiration, and honestly, this is something I hope to achieve with my photography. I love her style. I love the way she captures the story, how she tells a story. It's not even just capturing a story, she's telling a story from her perspective, and which is a humanitarian perspective, which isn't something we always necessarily see in photography, but I love that she incorporates humanitarianism within her photos. So I just want to end this presentation with a note from Amy. Ignorance of each other's stories leads us to assume we know them, and so we maintain perceptions of differences based on our own preconceived notions. I admire Amy for her ability to break down walls and connect individuals while also being like, hey, let's be better, because there's always room for improvement, and I do believe that humanity is fighting for good and a lot of amazing things are happening, but a lot more can be done. And I think her photos, again, like I've mentioned time and time again, capture the essence of humanity, both good and bad. There was an image she showed in her TED Talk, which again will be linked below. I don't know how to put this lightly, but it was a slaughtered elephant, and it's an incredibly gruesome photo, but it forces us as an audience to recognize the impacts and the horrors that we create. Hold on, there's a plastic bag on that tree. Sorry about that. I didn't want to forget it. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, right, the slaughtered elephant. I think a lot of the time humans don't have the accountability that we should, because we are very destructive creatures, but we're also really good at rebuilding and I guess evolving. But the thing is in that pursuit of bettering ourselves, we sometimes disregard the planet and animals, and sometimes even each other. And her photography is a great reminder that, we are all one, we all play a role, and we can change for the better collectively. For example, within that Last Goodbye photo series, she talks about how the attempts at poaching the rhinos had essentially been non-existent for 2 years because the community kind of came together and they all learned to love the rhinos and understand their importance to the ecosystem. At the end of the day, it is our responsibility to listen to each other, acknowledge one another, and work towards building something better for not only ourselves, but for the planet. And I think so often we get caught up in our own world that we fail to recognize, whether intentional or not. We're lacking unity. And though we are working towards it, it's people like Amy who are fully showcasing these stories. That's the only way we'll find connection, and we'll find a better understanding of who we are on this planet and the role that we play in society, in nature. Without recognizing the destruction that we cause, we'll never fix it. So that's what I love about Amy, is she's forcing us to look at the things that we've destroyed and the impacts we have. But she also reminds us that there is good, there is hope, and we have the ability to change it. We just have to try a little harder. And of course, the works cited. I really enjoy photography. I think, besides painting, that's one of my favorite things to do, and I would love to explore my photography more, and hopefully that's something I can do. I don't know how I really share that on this platform in terms of videos, but maybe in the future, we'll see. Do a little review of my own. See, I don't think you can do a review of your own. I mean, I guess you can. Getting sidetracked. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Treat people with kindness. Treat animals with kindness. Treat nature with kindness.